Art has been around for over a millennia, and with the main goal of making us feel emotions. As long as art has made us feel, it has made us fear. From horror video games to horror theater, to spooky music, to hell, I even own one of the earliest horror novels from ancient times. I think it's Chinese. But I want to learn, how did we get here? From monsters to psychos, from aliens to kaiju, let's take a journey together through the 100 years of horror and film. Now, when we talk about the first horror movie, there isn't really a consensus on it. The House of the Devil from 1896 is sometimes called the first horror movie. It features a guy turning into a bat, so it's also, I guess, the first vampire movie. But, like, that's 6 minutes long, and it's just kind of showing off rad editing effects for the time. So I don't really consider that a horror movie. Thomas Edison made a Frankenstein film in 1910, and a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde film came out in 1908. Now, one movie I did watch was the 1911 Italian film La Inferno, an adaptation of the Divine Comedy. It follows Dante and the angel Virgil descending into hell, and I mean, yeah, this movie is really creepy, watching the souls of the damned tortured, going through watching the gluttons be pelted with rain. The devil in this movie also looks amazing, but I still don't really think it falls under a true horror movie, although it's an interesting watch and I would recommend it. Now, the first two movies we're actually going to be classifying as horror films. Both come from the year 1920 in post-World War I Germany. They are The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and The Golem. Both these movies have no sound because they are part of the first era of horror films we'll be talking about, that being the silent era, where no one can hear you scream. The 1920s presented an uphill battle for early horror films. I mean, without sound, all you had to go off of to try and scare people were visuals and brief title cards for the dialogue. But they found a way to do it, and that was through the visuals. See, German Expressionism was the aesthetic of most of these films. Most movies at this time were focused on showing the real world, or at least fictional stories from within the real world. German Expressionism, however, had a much more artistic approach. Architecture is distorted and angular. The shadows are used to project on the background, making it more intense. And the whole thing kind of creates this very dream-like atmosphere, which is no wonder because these types of films did inspire Tim Burton. And we see this best in Dr. Caligari. The film is from the perspective of a man telling a story. Him and his friends stumble upon a carnival with a fortune teller who awakens a sleepwalker. One of them asks the teller how long he has to live, to which the sleepwalker responds that he will not last till morning. Sure enough, the sleepwalker kills him later that night, following to some madness pursuing in the town as people hunt down, trying to figure out who the murderer is. Towards the end of the film, it's revealed that the man telling the story is actually in an asylum, with characters from the movie being just workers and patients of the asylum. The closing shot lingers on Caligari, the doctor, just long enough for us to wonder, was the man's story true? And that is the question we're left with. Yes, this is the first time a horror movie ends on a cliffhanger, the true inception of its time. And the visuals are really what carry this film. I mean, just watch this with the lights turned out, completely in the dark, and you'll get hypnotized by the visuals. Phantom of the Opera also falls into this category. It is a classic, but I don't have much to say about it, because it's Phantom of the Opera. You probably, if you care about it, you've probably already seen it. What I noticed about a lot of these silent films is that there isn't really a hook at the beginning of the movie. Like, take Halloween, for example. In Halloween, there's the opening scene of Michael Myers as a kid killing his sister, and then it cuts to the actual main plot of the movie, but that first scene kind of, gets you into the story. That's not here. The movie just kind of starts. This makes the pacing a bit weird. Another thing I noticed was that the acting is often really, really, like, over the top and corny. Now, this makes sense for two reasons. Number one, without sound, you kind of need to project a lot more because you're just using face and body language to get across the emotions of the characters. And also, number two, a lot of the people working in the film industry at this time came from vaudeville and theater, where you already have to be very expressive and out there. And it's a lot less jarring on a stage in a theater than it is, like, on a movie screen. But easily the best horror film of the silent era is 1922's Nosferatu, which is loosely based off of the book Dracula, but not loose enough because the widow of the author sued the hell out of this movie, causing the company to make basically no profit, and all copies of the film being ordered to be destroyed. Took about like 30 years for the movie to be found again. It was lost media for a while because can't keep Dracula down, I guess. A real estate agent sells a home to Count Orlok next to his previous home in the town of Transylvania. What I noticed about this film when I researched it was that the castle they use for both the exterior and interior scenes is a real castle. They filmed on location and in location. A lot of other horror movies would have maybe an establishing shot of outside the castle, and then obviously the rest of the movie inside the set, but not Nosferatu because it's the GOAT. There's this amazing scene towards the beginning where Thomas Hutter, who's the main character, I guess, accidentally cuts his hand while cutting bread at dinner with Count Orlok, who basically lightens up at the shot of blood and tries to suck up Hutter's blood. This movie is completely carried by the performance of Count Orlok. His movements are so slow and calculated. His shadows make him this devilish figure. Every frame involving him is iconic. I mean, come on, look at this goofy-ass little goober. The grainy black and white footage also creates a monster that would be replicated for the next 100 years. Interestingly, this movie also seems to be a commentary on disease. Let me explain. This was just 4 years out from the 1918 Spanish flu. Orlok always seems to be accompanied by rats. A boat that he haunts is when it's docked with all the crew members dead on arrival, as though they've been struck with a plague. There's this one beautiful bit of editing where Ellen, who is Thomas's wife, is haunted by Count Orlok. The vampire looks to his right before it's a cut to Ellen in a completely different location, seemingly looking back in fear. It's a very simple piece of editing, but for the time, it was really cool. The only way to stop Count Orlok is if a maiden gives up her blood willingly, something Ellen does in the most iconic scene of the film. Orlok is seen in shadow with his arm casting a shadow on Ellen's heart as he drains the life out of her. Both Ellen and Orlok die, and this is where the movie ends. Also, this movie is, like, gay as hell. I mean, come on. There are some clear homoerotic tendencies beneath the layer of this film. This movie isn't as stylized as Caligari, but you can very clearly see the German Expressionist influence, and you can see Nosferatu's DNA in plenty of monster films following the whole Gothic architecture. You know, Nosferatu was kind of the first to do that. And, yeah, this movie is great. It's an easy recommendation. It's probably the best silent film you'll ever see, outside of maybe like a Buster Keaton or a Charlie Chaplin movie. But, yeah, it's a classic for a reason.